Yo, what's going on, guys? Just a quick video just to show you how to read news. Um, cool. So first thing we want to do is obviously go to Forex Factory. So you just type in Forex Factory with whatever browser you're using, and you come to either today's news or this week's news, whatever one you want to do. Now, as you can see, today is the 20th of March, and right now, as of this video, it's 8:21 p.m. So the last news we did have was the USD news, which was literally 2 hours and 20 minutes ago. Let me let me zoom in like this. There we go. Let's zoom in, reset. Perfect. So as you can see now, right? So today we had GBP news, we had USD news, and we got NZD news as well. So the New Zealand dollar. But obviously, the one I want to show you is obviously we're just going to focus on the USD news. So with that being said, now we have four red folders, which is obviously high impact. Now the way to focus on this, whenever you see a red folder news, and this also applies for orange folder news, and I'll show you this. So if you click this little funnel over here, you can filter your news. So you've got gray, which is very low impact, and then you've got amber. Sorry, you've got yellow. Then you've got orange, and then you've got red. Red is obviously the most highest and the most impactful news there is. Those are the ones that cause massive spikes or massive influx in volume. And then obviously we have orange and yellow. I don't really focus on that per se, so I just focus on high impacts because I don't. There's more volume with the high impacts compared to something like obviously the orange or the yellow, especially the gray. So I don't really focus on that. So if you want to filter it, you filter it. You choose which pairs and the exact event type. Now, with that being said, with the USD news, we have, as you can see, there's three, actually, there's four red folders. One that came out at 6 p.m., so 2 hours ago, and then another that came out 6:30, so still 2 hours ago as well. But the only one you want to really be focusing on when it comes to news is the ones with actual monetary values. Well, not monetary values, but anything that actually has a numeric value. So these numbers are numeric values with the percentages. Those are the only ones you want to focus on. If it has a little graph, a bar chart next to it, those are the ones you want to focus on. As you can see, we've got these ones over here, these three that I've just highlighted. Those three are just statements. So you can actually just click this little box over here and you can just read anything that's there. It tells you exactly why traders care, etc. So if you read that, sometimes they release actual statements that you can download, um, obviously from the press conference. So if you click on this little hyperlink over here, it will take you to another website. You could just read the news and obviously understand exactly why it's why the news came out the way it did, whether it's positive or negative. Now, for me, I don't really get in too deep into it. I just read the values that's being presented. There isn't a way you can actually predict what's going to happen before it happens, especially if you're already in the trade. But the reason why I just read the numbers is because if I'm already in a trade, if I look at this number when it's printed exactly on the dot of 6 p.m., it will it will determine whether I stay in the trade or whether I'm going to get out the trade early before it hits my stop loss. That's because I understand the difference between a primary pair and a secondary pair, and I understand what these numbers mean. So, for example, with this one here for today, we've got the USD news, federal fund rates. So, as you can see, the previous was 5.50%. The forecast is 5.50% as well. So, the forecast is basically uh, that's what is estimated for the numeric value to be for today's news. Of course, you got the actual, which is which is the exact number that was printed at 6 p.m. on the dot. That's today's news. The previous is obviously the previous time that the news came out. What the value was. The previous time before today was January 31st. That was 5.5, as you can see, and you can see over here as well. All the numbers technically just been 5.5 every single time. Um, each event, each news type, it varies. Let me see if I can show you, for example, wrong button, sorry. Yeah, for example, as you can see, the previous on NZD, 0.5, forecast is 0.2, and the actual was actually negative 0.3, and that was a negative news. And it was negative, and I know it was negative because when the actuals are printed, exactly when the news drops, if it's red, it means it's negative. It's negatively impacted on the actual currency, and if it's green, it means it's positively impacted. And the way it's compared to the forecast. So depending on what the news specs states, obviously then you'll be able to know what's going to happen. So let me go back to USD for example now. Now the first thing you want to be focusing on is the usual effect. On the usual effect, it will say actual greater than forecast is good for currency. Now, it doesn't always state actual greater than forecast. Sometimes it says actual less than forecast is good for currency. So it just depends on the news event type and as well as the currency pair. So you need to pay attention to that, right? Now, the way this works is again, there's going to be a countdown every 5 minutes 5 minutes before the news actually occurs. There's always going to be a countdown. So depending on if I'm in a trade already, me personally, I just focus on um, not the fundamental side of things, which is obviously the news side of things, but I just focus on the technical side of things. So if I'm already in a trade, for example, if I'm in a trade that contains USD, depending on if it's USD CAD, which will obviously be a primary pair because the USD becomes the very first pair that we're trading. In other words, we're trading the USD against the Canadian dollar. So if I'm buying USD, for example, I'm actually saying the US dollar is stronger than the Canadian dollar at this point, right? That's if I'm in a buy trade or a long trade. If I'm selling the USD, I'm basically saying the US dollar is weaker than the Canadian dollar at this very moment. This is before the news even hits. So you need to understand the difference between the primary pair and the secondary pair. The USD and USD CAD is the primary pair. The CAD is the secondary pair, and that goes for anything else. So if we're talking NZD JPY, for example, NZD is the primary pair, the JPY is the secondary pair. So when you have news coming out like this, it literally states here the currencies for today. So when you see something like this and it says USD, whatever pair you're trading, whether the USD is a primary pair or a secondary pair, it doesn't make a difference. But to understand which direction that pair is going to go, whether it's a buy or sell, depending on if it's a primary pair or secondary pair, that is what matters most in this case. So in this instance, for the news that just came out today, the usual effect, as it states, actual greater than forecast is good for the currency. Now, as you can see, the actual actually came out. The actual came out at 5.50, which is equal to the forecast. Now, technically speaking, right, that value is equal to. So when it states actual greater than forecast, the only time the US dollar is going to increase in its value is if the actual, is greater than the forecast. If it's equal to or less than, in comparison to what the usual effect is, it means that the US dollar is getting weaker. So it has to be greater than, and it can't be equal than, and it can't be less than. Otherwise, the US dollar is weaker. So in this case, uh, if I go to a USD, so USD chef in this case, right now, if I go to the 1 hour, you'll see there is a massive drop exactly at the time of the news event. This is 6 o'clock. So if you look at the bottom of trading view, it says 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. my time, right? If I go back to um, Forex Factory, as you can see, 6 p.m. That's the time that this specific news dropped, 6 p.m. Again, the actual value was equal to what the forecast was. Therefore, the value of the US dollar isn't going to go up at that point. It has to be greater than in order for it to go up. That's what's caused this massive drop on a 1 hour time frame. Of course, if you go on a smaller time frames like the 15 minutes, you'll just see a massive, look, you got a massive sell off just before news hit. News hit at this point over here. So you got a massive spike down, and then what happened? You got a massive spike up to fill in that massive spike, and then price continue to push downwards, right? Now, prior to all of that, if your market, this is what happens. If you're already in a trade, right, depending on where you're getting in at. So if you had already marked this out, for example, look, you've got a weekly support area over here, right? So instantly you should have really been, telling yourself, okay, we're only going to go for sales around this area, right? Now we'll go back to the daily, depending on how you want to enter your trades, right? Look, let's just say you entered, well, no, let's not go on a daily, but let's just say random strategy. Let's just say you entered, at the top of or after this fractal was formed. So let's say at this candle, right, on a 4 hour time frame. Let me drop down to the 1 hour so you can see. Cool. So let's just say after this fractal was formed, 2 candles after. So let's just say you entered at the top of this blue candle, right? And the stop loss at the top of that weekly zone, boom. Now, if you had already entered this trade, for example, look, right, you would have already smacked TP. Now, this is a random strategy. I'm just showing you. This is how you can identify whether you get out that trade early or not, right? Or just let it ride. Because if you're already knowing where the technical aspects of the trade is, right, you can now say to yourself, okay, 5 minutes before news comes out, you can actually watch, Forex Factory and determine, okay, let me read the usual effect. What does it say? It says actual greater than forecast is good for the currency. If you check the previous numbers, not to say that you can predict what the numbers is going to be, but you will understand, okay, before news even hits, by the time the number appears on the screen, this number, because there's always a countdown, by the time the number appears on the screen, immediately you'll know in the back of your head, is this a positive impact on the US dollar, or is this a negative impact on the US dollar? As I said, because it's equal to, and the usual effect states it has to be greater in order for the US dollar to continue going up, right? Because this number is actually equal to, it's going to decrease in value, which is exactly why you got this massive sell-off on the USD CHF pair. Why? Because the USD, remember, this is a USD news, right? So the fact that the US dollar comes first, being the primary pair, you're going to get a massive sell-off. Compared to something that has the USD as a secondary pair, and I'm going to show you an example now. Let's see. NZD, yeah, NZD USD. You see how we've got this massive influx of volume to the upside on NZD USD. Now, NZD becomes the primary pair and the secondary pair becomes USD. All right, so we've got the total opposite on the NZD USD compared to what we just had on USD CHF. USD CHF, we had a massive sell-off. Now we've got the complete opposite. Why? Because the USD becomes the secondary pair. Now we're saying that the New Zealand dollar, NZD, is actually stronger than the USD. And that is correct in terms of the news, right? What time was it? So this is 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Exactly at this time. Look, and I'll go to the 15-minute. Same spikes that we saw on USD CHF, right? Massive spike to one side, massive spike to the other side, and then what the price do? Completely took off, right? It's as simple as that. Now, again, depending on how you trade, if you've marked out your technicals, you would have already seen this, right? So look here, we've got this massive weekly resistance area, support area over here, right? You've already seen that. What did the price do? It broke out of it a little bit, not a problem at all. But guess what? Because of that news, because you were able to identify the news and what could potentially happen depending on what setups you have, right? Depending on your strategy, you would have been able to catch this or at least stayed in the trade. For any reason, for example, let's just say you didn't mark out this weekly resistance zone. Let's just say you sold from this area over here, right? And your stop loss was over here. And your TP was, I don't know, all the way down there, for example, right? Cool. Now you would have seen, okay, prior to news happening during the day, you're in profit. As you can see, you're riding in profit. Maybe you didn't even move it. Maybe you didn't move your stop loss to break even just yet. But now, most definitely, you see what happens. Now you're in drawdown, right? You were in major profits as prices were all the way down here, but now you're in drawdown now over here. Again, if you were to enter over here, for example, and you put your stop loss, I don't know, let's just say you put it in line with this, right? Guess what? You would have been in profit a little bit, and then after that news hit, guess what? You would have been stopped out. But like I said, if you were to analyze, not even analyze, but if you were to go on Forex Factory at the time of the news occurring, you would have seen, okay, those numbers, exactly as it drops, what does it mean? Does it mean that the US dollar is stronger in value, or is it weaker in value in comparison to what the actual monetary, not monetary, the actual numeric value being 5.5? What does the actual in comparison to the forecast have? Is it positive? Is it positive news, or is it negative news? That is how you analyze news. It's as simple as that. So eventually, before literally, I would say literally like 5 seconds as after those numbers have dropped, you can easily get out of this trade prior to price stopping you out, because you already know, okay, price is going to continue heading up. So even when price got to about, maybe, let's say, where, let's just, point it out on my stop loss, even when the price got to about here, right, which is, let's say, this level here, right, where I got the dotted lines. Even if price started closing above that area after you were already in profit, guess what? You would have closed that trade out, and you wouldn't have actually lost as much as you risked. It's as simple as that. That's how you read news, and that's how I do it. Of course, as I said, you can go back and actually read the statements. Um, so you can read all of this if you need to. I don't do that. I just read the usual effect, and I read the history, and I read, obviously, the previous forecast and the actual, and I know the difference between the numbers and what it means. Like GBP, for example, earlier today, actual greater than forecast is good for currency, right? That's all I need to read. I read the previous, I read the history, I read the forecast just so I know what's going on, and I'll read the actual. As you can see, the actual actually turned out to be red. It's red because this is in comparison to what the forecast is. 3.4 is obviously less than 3.5. So with the GBP, it means that anything beginning with GBP is gonna have a massive sell-off. Anything ending in GBP is gonna have a massive, a buy-off, right? So just going for longs, and I'll show you an example of that. Euro GBP, we should have some massive buys around that time, and that was around 7 in the morning for me. So that's probably around this time here. As you can see, I already saw that, which is why you got this massive wick to the downside and to the upside. If I go to the 15-minute, you see that massive influx just before news hit, and as news hit, came all the way up. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to continue going up, right? It doesn't have to follow trend and continue going up, but it's going to have that massive influx, that massive wick to either want to one side or to the upside or to the downside, whichever side it wants to go, depending on what the numeric values is, right? As simple as that. And now if I show you something starting with GBP, so maybe GBP CHF, because it starts with GBP. If I go back to 7 a.m. in the morning, which is probably, where is it? Probably this candle here, yeah. Okay, let me mark this out. Okay, go to the 15-minute. So from here, right? Now that, given the fact that this candle didn't actually have a massive, a massive push, right? But you can see how price started coming down to the downside, right? And then what did it do? It respected this area over here. As you can see, respected this area, right? So it did start coming down, respected this area. As it came to this area, what did price do? It bounced straight off, and it bounced straight off again, and a further time as well, right? So instantly you can say, okay, because of that news, right? Sorry, what am I saying? No, sorry, ignore me. I just remember this is GBP. So it starts with GBP. So because the news came out negative, you're gonna get that massive sell-off. So this is what happened, right? So price started heading up just before news, and then what happened? As soon as news, well, just before news hit, what did price do? Completely sold off, which is why you got this massive wick to the downside. And if I go back to Euro GBP, sorry, I remember, because now that's why price shot all the way up, because GBP is actually the secondary pair. It's as simple as that. It's not hard. I don't try to predict news, but I will read it just before news hits, so I understand whether I need to get out of this trade early or whether I'm going to let it run. It's as simple as that. I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions.